The Galactic Alliance was vast, a collection of over 1,000 species spanning countless star systems. We believed ourselves to be invincible, the guardians of an ancient and unparalleled legacy of peace, progress, and power. Humanity was a latecomer, a speck of dust in the grand cosmos, barely climbing out of their gravity well when we had been charting galaxies for millennia. They were ants compared to the titans of the stars. And yet, here we were, facing the unimaginable, the day we surrendered. It began as a small ripple, a disturbance so faint that few even noticed it. On the outer edges of the Alliance's jurisdiction, human fleets moved quietly, almost humbly as they made contact with smaller, unaligned civilizations. The humans spoke of trade, of mutual defense, of respect for sovereignty, terms that were laughable to the great powers of the Alliance. The Council of Elders convened, their decisions swift and predictable. Humanity would be absorbed into the Alliance, just as countless other species had been. Resistance was futile, of course. What could a race so new, so primitive, possibly hope to achieve against the combined might of 1,000 worlds? A single Alliance fleet was dispatched to Earth, a gesture meant to demonstrate overwhelming power. It was supposed to be a formality, a brief negotiation before humanity bent the knee. But when the fleet arrived in Sol's orbit, they were greeted not by diplomats, but by a silence that stretched uncomfortably across the void. Admiral Tkar of the Draenor, the most respected strategist in the Alliance, paced the bridge of his flagship, the Vialoriath. He gazed at the blue and green planet below, its beauty masking what he perceived as its insignificance. The humans had not responded to hails, nor had they scrambled ships to engage. Instead they waited. Perhaps they do not understand the protocols, mused his second-in-command, a feline-like roarhen named Kix. Or perhaps, Tkar replied, his mandibles clicking in irritation, they think their silence unnerves us. So they are fools. Prepare the orbital bombardment demonstration. Let them see what awaits defiance. The Alliance had perfected the art of intimidation. A single volley from the fleet would carve a canyon into Earth's surface, a show of power designed to bring even the most stubborn civilizations to heel. But as the orders were given and the energy cannons charged, an unexpected blip appeared on the scanners. A ship. It was small, a fraction of the size of the Vialoriath, and it looked almost laughable compared to the sleek, advanced vessels of the Alliance. Yet it moved with purpose, closing the distance between itself and the fleet. Identify, barked Tkar. It's human, Kix said, her voice tinged with disbelief. But sir, the energy readings? Before she could finish, the human ship transmitted a single message. It was short, delivered in a crisp, confident voice. Do not fire. The room fell silent as Tkar stared at the words on the holographic display. He was about to dismiss it as an empty threat when the human ship activated its weapons systems. Alarms blared across the Vialoriath. The readings were impossible. This single, unimpressive vessel carried armaments that rivaled the fleet's flagship. How? Kix whispered, her fur bristling. Tkar hesitated for the first time in decades. Open a channel. The human captain appeared on the screen, a middle-aged man with piercing eyes and a calm demeanor that was unnerving in its confidence. He introduced himself as Captain Elias Ward of the Earth Defense Initiative. You've come to intimidate us, he said, his voice devoid of fear. But you've made a critical miscalculation. You see, humanity doesn't intimidate easily. Tkar's mandibles flared in frustration. Your defiance is meaningless. You are outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. Stand down or we will reduce your world to ash. Captain Ward smiled, a gesture that was unsettling in its serenity. You misunderstand. We don't stand down. Ever. The connection cut abruptly and the human ship fired. It was not a reckless act of bravado, nor was it a desperate attempt to inflict damage before inevitable destruction. It was a calculated, precise strike. The Vialoriath shook violently as its shields buckled, and for the first time in the Alliance's long history, an enemy had drawn blood. What followed was chaos. The human ship moved like nothing the fleet had ever encountered. It was faster, more agile, and its weapons systems defied understanding. Ships that had been the pride of the Alliance were reduced to smoldering wrecks in minutes. Tkar watched in disbelief as his fleet, the fleet, was decimated by a single vessel. How is this possible? Kix cried, her claws digging into the console. Tkar could not answer. For the first time in his life he felt something he had thought himself immune to, fear. The human ship did not finish them off. Instead, it retreated, vanishing into the void as suddenly as it had appeared. But the message was clear. Humanity would not be conquered so easily. The defeat was a humiliation, but the Council of Elders refused to acknowledge it as such. A fluke, they called it, dismissing humanity as a minor inconvenience. Another fleet was dispatched, larger and more heavily armed than the first. But as reports filtered back, a grim pattern emerged. Every fleet sent to Earth met the same fate. Human ships were few in number, but their technology and tactics were unlike anything the Alliance had encountered. The humans fought with a ferocity and ingenuity that bordered on madness. They turned their weaknesses into strengths, their limited resources into advantages. The Alliance's pride began to crack. By the time humanity launched its first counterattack, the cracks had become fissures. The humans did not target military installations or political centers. Instead, they struck at the heart of the Alliance's arrogance, its sense of superiority. They hacked into communication networks, broadcasting footage of their victories to every corner of the galaxy. They exposed the Alliance's failures, its weaknesses, its hypocrisies. And the galaxy watched. As Tkar stood on the bridge of his battered flagship, staring at the holographic projection of the Council of Elders, he realized that the unthinkable had happened. Humanity had done what no other species had ever dared. They had turned the Alliance's power against itself. "We cannot afford to lose more," one elder said, his voice trembling. "We must negotiate." "Negotiate," another scoffed. "With primitives?" "They are not primitives," Tkar said quietly, his mandibles clicking with resignation. "They are predators." The council fell silent. And so the decision was made. The Alliance would sue for peace. Humanity would not be conquered, they would be respected. It was the day we surrendered. The Galactic Alliance had never encountered an adversary like humanity. For millennia, the Alliance had subsisted on the bedrock principle that cooperation and diplomacy were the highest forms of evolution. In their collective arrogance, they viewed conflict as the behavior of primitive species, something to be eradicated as societies advanced. Humanity didn't fit into this paradigm. Admiral Tkar leaned over the battle table aboard the Via Loriath. The holographic map of Alliance space displayed a chaotic patchwork of skirmishes, with red indicators marking territories where human forces had struck. These attacks were not widespread, nor were they reckless. Instead, they were surgical, calculated to strike at the Alliance's core. "They've severed trade routes along the Zither corridor," Kix reported, her voice strained as she tried to make sense of the data flooding in. "That leaves half of our food and medical supplies unable to reach the outer sectors." Kara's claws tapped against the table in frustration. "They're not acting like an inferior species. They're acting like predators stalking their prey." It wasn't just the physical attacks that unnerved him. Humanity had turned the Alliance's advanced technology against itself. Communication relays were jammed, propaganda infiltrated local broadcasts, and entire sectors were plunged into chaos. The humans weren't fighting to win battles, they were fighting to break the Alliance's spirit. On the planet Ternara, a vital supply hub, Alliance troops prepared for yet another battle. The city was fortified, surrounded by shimmering energy shields and defended by thousands of soldiers from dozens of species. General Keswick, a towering reptilian of the Draxari species, stood at the command post, his confidence unshaken. "Humans are outnumbered and outmatched," Keswick growled, his deep voice rumbling through the room. "They cannot breach our defenses." But as the night fell, the humans arrived, not with a grand fleet or overwhelming force, but with precision and ingenuity. A single dropship descended silently, slipping through the energy shields like a phantom. By the time the Alliance forces realized what had happened, the humans had already hacked into the planetary defense grid. Explosions ripped through the Alliance's ranks as their own weapon systems turned against them. Panic spread like wildfire. The human soldiers, clad in adaptive camouflage armor, moved through the chaos with terrifying efficiency. They struck hard and fast, dismantling the Alliance's defenses in hours. By dawn, Ternara had fallen. In the aftermath, General Keswick was forced to stand before his surviving troops, his once proud form hunched in defeat. "They're not warriors," he muttered bitterly. "They're predators." The phrase began to spread across the Alliance. Predators. It encapsulated the sheer unpredictability of humanity, their ability to adapt, to turn disadvantage into victory. Back on Earth, Captain Elias Ward sat in a dimly lit war room, surrounded by his officers. Holographic displays projected live feeds of ongoing operations across Alliance space. "We're not here to conquer them," Ward reminded his team. "We're here to show them what happens when you underestimate humanity." Commander Lee, his second-in-command, nodded. "The Alliance thinks we're reckless. They don't realize we've been planning this for years. Humanity's entry into the galactic stage had been anything but random. While the Alliance viewed them as a primitive race, humanity had been quietly studying their adversaries. They dissected Alliance tactics, reverse-engineered their technology, and prepared for the inevitable confrontation. We've learned from them, Ward continued, but they haven't learned from us. That's their greatest weakness. In the council chambers on the capital planet of Orindar, the mood was grim. The elders sat in a circular formation, their once unshakable authority now a shadow of its former self. Reports of human victories dominated every discussion. We cannot allow this to continue, Elder Zelvar said, his voice trembling with desperation. If the humans gain more support, the Alliance will fracture. But others were less certain. Elder Mivrana, one of the few who had advocated for diplomacy from the beginning, spoke cautiously. Perhaps it is time we reconsider our approach. Humanity has proven itself resilient. Resilient? Zelvar snapped. They are dangerous. They refuse to integrate, they reject diplomacy, and they dismantle our fleets with impunity. We cannot negotiate with them. Mivrana's calm demeanor didn't falter. And yet they have not sought to conquer us. They strike with precision, yes, but they do not attack civilian populations. They are sending us a message. What message? Another elder demanded. That they are not afraid of us, Mivrana replied simply. In the weeks that followed, humanity's reputation began to shift across the galaxy. To the oppressed and marginalized species within the Alliance, humanity became a symbol of defiance. Stories of their victories spread like wildfire, igniting hope in those who had long felt crushed under the weight of the Alliance's bureaucracy and arrogance. On the outer rim world of Vallara, a small rebellion against the Alliance gained new momentum after a human operative infiltrated the planet and supplied them with advanced weaponry. They came to help us, one rebel leader said in a broadcast that was intercepted and spread across the galaxy. When no one else would, the humans stood with us. This act of defiance infuriated the Council but only solidified humanity's image as both a threat and a potential ally to those disillusioned with the Alliance. Admiral Tkar knew the tide was turning and it terrified him. He had spent his life believing in the Alliance's supremacy, but now he faced an adversary who didn't play by the same rules. They're not just fighting us, he said during a private meeting with the Council. They're reshaping the galaxy. If we don't adapt, we will fall. But the Council was divided. Some, like Elder Zelvar, still clung to the belief that humanity could be crushed with enough force. Others, like Mivrana, began to see the humans as more than a threat. They were a mirror reflecting the Alliance's own weaknesses. As the second phase of the conflict drew to a close, humanity's strategy became clear. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to prove a point. And the galaxy was starting to listen. You said. The Galactic Alliance, a coalition of over 30 advanced species, had prided itself on maintaining galactic order for millennia. Its fleets were vast, its technology unparalleled, and its diplomacy the glue that held together an otherwise fractious galaxy. Yet, for all its power and unity, the Alliance had never faced an adversary like humanity. Admiral Tkar's claws scraped the smooth metal surface of the command table aboard the Via Loriath. Before him, a projection of the galaxy displayed a rapidly spreading pattern of red indicators. Each one represented a human incursion, a bold attack that disrupted critical supply routes, disabled communications hubs, or destabilized the Alliance's carefully maintained balance of power. They're spreading chaos like a wildfire, said Kix, his ever-loyal strategist. Her usual calm demeanor was replaced with visible frustration. Every time we think we've contained them, they strike somewhere else. What's worse, Tkar growled, is that they're not just attacking us. They're rallying the oppressed. Reports were flooding in from the outer sectors. Planets and factions long marginalized by the Alliance's rigid hierarchy were rising up. Vallara, Vexus Prime, and even once loyal strongholds like Zither IV were experiencing rebellions. And at the heart of these uprisings were whispers of human support. On Vallara, a meeting was taking place deep within the subterranean city of Isha. The air was thick with the scent of burning torches and the gathered rebels, a mix of insectoid varish, hulking Kroth, and smaller, wiry species, listened intently to the figure standing at the center. Captain Elias Ward, a human operative, had become something of a legend among these disenfranchised factions. His sharp blue eyes scanned the room as he spoke. You've lived under the Alliance's thumb for generations. They've taxed your resources, stifled your cultures, and called it peace. But peace isn't the absence of war, it's the presence of justice. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ward continued, his voice firm and resolute. We're not here to conquer. We're here to give you the tools to take back what's yours. With a gesture, he revealed a cache of human-designed weapons, compact, efficient, and devastatingly effective. The rebels stepped forward cautiously, examining the sleek designs. One Varish leader, her chitinous body reflecting the flickering light, spoke hesitantly. "Why would your people help us? What do you gain?" Ward met her compound eyes. "Because when the Alliance came for us, we stood alone. No one answered our call. We won't make the same mistake they did." Back on Orindar, the Alliance's capital planet, the Council was in disarray. The chamber, usually a place of calculated discussion and calm diplomacy, was now a cacophony of raised voices and pointed accusations. "They're undermining everything we've built." Elder Zelvar slammed his fist against the table, his usually serene visage contorted in rage. "This isn't just a military conflict, it's a cultural insurgency." Elder Mivrana, seated across from him, maintained her composure. "Perhaps it is time we reflect on why this is happening. The humans didn't create the discontent in the outer sectors. We did. They're merely exploiting it." "Exploiting?" Zelvar spat. "They're inciting rebellion, turning our people against us. This is war." "War, yes," Mivrana replied, her tone sharp, "but one we provoked. Humanity is holding up a mirror to our flaws, and instead of addressing them, we lash out like cornered beasts." On the human flagship Resolute, Captain Ward and his crew monitored the Alliance's struggles with grim satisfaction. The bridge was a hub of activity, with officers coordinating operations across multiple systems. "They're fracturing," said Commander Lee, gesturing to a holographic display showing Alliance sectors. "The rebellions are spreading faster than they can contain them." Ward nodded. "Good. We don't need to defeat their fleets, we just need to make them question their unity." The Resolute wasn't just a warship, it was a symbol of humanity's resolve. Its design was unorthodox compared to Alliance ships, angular and rugged, with an emphasis on adaptability over aesthetics. To the Alliance, it was a crude, brutish vessel. To humanity, it was a testament to their ingenuity and resilience. "Do you think they'll sue for peace?" Lee asked, her voice tinged with skepticism. Ward shook his head. "Not yet. They're too proud." But pride has a way of turning into desperation. The Alliance's desperation became evident on the battlefield of Nithos, a strategically vital planet known for its vast energy reserves. The Alliance had fortified the planet with a near-impenetrable defense network, confident that humanity wouldn't dare to attack such a heavily guarded target. But humanity didn't attack Nithos. Not directly. Instead, they infiltrated the planet's underground systems, using their renowned ingenuity to bypass the surface defenses entirely. When the Alliance forces realized what was happening, it was too late. Explosions rocked the planetary core, disabling the energy reserves that powered the Alliance's fleets in the surrounding sectors. Admiral Tkar, overseeing the operation from orbit, watched in horror as his forces scrambled to contain the damage. "How did they get through?" he demanded, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. "They used our own tunnels," Kix reported, her voice trembling. "They studied our infrastructure, turned it against us." The realization struck Tkar like a physical blow. The humans weren't just fighting, they were learning, adapting, evolving. Every battle was a lesson, every setback a stepping stone. In the aftermath of Nithos, the Alliance's morale was at an all-time low. The Council convened once more, their faces grim. "We cannot sustain this," said Elder Mivrana. "Every day we lose more support. If we don't find a way to end this conflict, the Alliance will collapse." Zelvar, his arrogance finally giving way to fear, looked around the room. "What do you propose? Surrender?" "No," Mivrana replied. "Dialogue. It's time we treated humanity as equals." The suggestion was met with silence. For the first time, the Council had no rebuttal. Across the galaxy, the tide was turning. Humanity's unconventional warfare had shattered the illusion of the Alliance's invincibility. But more than that, it had ignited a spark, a belief that even the mightiest empires could fall when faced with the unyielding determination of those who refused to bow. And humanity, with all its flaws and contradictions, stood as a testament to the power of defiance. Admiral Tkar stood on the bridge of the Vialoriath, his once proud posture now weighed down by defeat. Outside the viewport, the remains of the Alliance fleet drifted lifelessly in orbit around Xeris 3, their glittering hulls scorched and broken. The humans had not only defeated them, they had humiliated them. The Alliance's finest ships, its most advanced weapons, and its centuries of unchallenged dominance had all been rendered meaningless by a species they once deemed primitive. "Admiral," Kix said, her voice hesitant. Incoming transmission from the human flagship. Tar clenched his jaw, his claws digging into the armrests of his command chair. He gave a slow nod. Put it through. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing Captain Elias Ward. His face was stern but calm, his uniform marked only by a single emblem, a simple blue and green sphere symbolizing Earth. Behind him, the bridge of the human flagship Resolute was alive with activity, its crew quietly efficient. Admiral Tkar, Ward began, his tone measured. It's over? Tar's lips curled into a snarl, but he forced himself to remain composed. Do you expect us to kneel, human? To grovel at your feet? Ward's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice remained steady. No, Admiral. We don't want you to kneel. We want you to stand. The words hung in the air, an unexpected turn that silenced the bridge of the Vialoriath. Tar tilted his head, his suspicion evident. Explain? In the council chamber on Orindar, Elder Mivrana stood before a divided assembly. The once mighty Galactic Alliance had been reduced to a fragile coalition, its members questioning not only their leadership but the very principles that had held them together. The humans have proven their strength, Mivrana said, her voice echoing through the vast hall. But more than that, they have exposed our weaknesses, our arrogance, our complacency, and our disregard for those we deemed lesser. Zelvar, seated across from her, looked up with weary eyes. And what do you propose we do now, Mivrana? Surrender our sovereignty to them? No, she replied firmly. We propose something greater. Partnership. The murmurs in the chamber grew louder, some in agreement, others in protest. But Mivrana pressed on. Humanity did not destroy us when they had the chance. They fought to prove a point, that unity is not born from dominance but from respect. If we cannot learn from this, then perhaps we do not deserve to lead. On Xeris 3, where humanity's forces had established a temporary base, the first meeting between human and alliance leaders was underway. The conference hall was a stark contrast to the battlefield it overlooked, its sleek design a testament to humanity's adaptability. Admiral Tkar entered cautiously, his every step calculated. Behind him, Kix and a handful of other officers followed, their expressions ranging from curiosity to resentment. At the far end of the room, Captain Ward stood waiting, flanked by his own officers. Thank you for coming, Ward began, extending a hand in a gesture of goodwill. Tar hesitated, then clasped the human's hand. The gesture felt strange, alien, but it also carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. I didn't come here for pleasantries, human. If this is your version of victory, I want to know what it means for us. Ward gestured to the seats around the table, inviting the delegation to sit. This isn't about victory, Admiral. It's about survival. Not just for humans but for all of us. The discussions were tense at first, each side guarded and skeptical. But as the hours passed, something remarkable began to happen. The humans shared their strategies, their reasons for resisting the Alliance's authority, and their vision for a galaxy where no species was left behind. In turn, the Alliance leaders admitted their failures, their misjudgments, and their fears. For the first time, they were truly listening to one another. On the outskirts of the galaxy, where the oppressed factions had risen in rebellion, a message was broadcast from the newly united forces of humanity and the Alliance. It was a simple declaration, but its impact was profound. No more war. No more domination. From this day forward, the galaxy belongs to all of us. The message spread like wildfire, reaching planets and systems that had long been ignored or exploited. On Vallara, the Varish rebels laid down their weapons, choosing diplomacy over conflict. On Vexus Prime, the Croft dismantled their war machines and began rebuilding their cities. Even on distant Zithar 4, where resistance had been fiercest, the people paused to consider the possibility of a future without bloodshed. Years later, in the heart of Orindar, a new galactic assembly was formed. Its design was inspired by humanity's own democratic ideals, with every species given equal representation. The Assembly Hall, once a symbol of the Alliance's dominance, now stood as a beacon of unity. Admiral Tkar, now retired, watched the proceedings from a quiet corner of the gallery. Beside him, Kix leaned in and whispered, "Do you think this will last?" Tar's gaze lingered on the human representatives, their voices blending seamlessly with those of the other species. "I don't know," he admitted. "But for the first time in my life, I believe it's possible." Across the galaxy, the scars of war began to heal. Former enemies became allies, and ancient rivalries gave way to new partnerships. And at the center of it all was humanity, a species that had refused to kneel, refused to dominate, and instead chose to stand for something greater. The galaxy would never forget the day the Alliance surrendered to the humans. Not because it marked the end of a war, but because it marked the beginning of something far more profound. A united future, forged in the fires of conflict and tempered by the unyielding resolve of a species that refused to give up.